pet peeves with my frame. It's kind of a pain to get, go in there and remove all those Allen screws. And once you get those panels off, you've got a nice big area. You can slide that battery right out. It makes it very easy to work on. Now, these frames are available pretty much everywhere. I believe I've even seen them on Amazon. The one downside is they are a little bit more expensive, but I still feel like they're reasonably priced. Okay, here's this frame from Elite. Now, I believe this is the same frame used by Vector e-bikes, and it is one of my favorite frames in this design. Now, that's partially due to its construction. They're using triangles in the corners, and I do feel that that makes it stronger. Now, the frame's...
Now, yes, the Vector Elite frame is the exact same frame. Yeah, they use some different panels on there, and anyway, bottom line is, after doing your research, you'll find, and this guy's name is Sam Johnson, by the way. You can check out his channel. He did a nice video on all the DIY frames, as far as Emoto DIY frames, which ones being the best, the strongest, the most durable, blah blah blah. And there's a couple other guys that did the same thing, and they all said and agreed the same thing as I say, is that that EEB frame, no matter who, what company is branding it, because Garmata puts their name on that frame. Let's see what else. Garmata, NB Power. Don't never get old, guys. I have brain freeze all the time. NB Power, Delfast, Garmata, Cab Motorworks uses this frame. A lot of companies use this frame because, as far as it being a strong, durable frame that won't break on you, that has solid welds, it's just a great frame, especially for the money. It's one of the best DIY frames you're going to get out there, and that's why I use it as well. However, Sam Johnson did mention it had a nice bit of space in it as far as battery compartment. But let me tell you another reason why this frame, if you're going to build a high power e-bike, why it's even more important to use this frame. And I'm going to show you better than I can tell you. Now, of course, I got the beast sitting back there. And right here, I have a frame, as you can see. Let me angle my camera a little bit. Hopefully that's in frame. Okay. Here are 2 mile cells. Okay. Now, when I put them like that, front to back, side to side, however, that right there is very important. That length right there, that width. Because the first thing you have to do when you're building a battery is determine your cell layout. How you're going to configure your cells for space, and how you're going to configure and lay out your cells as far as your series parallel connections, and depending on what size battery you're building. However, let's go back to this, what I was about to show you. When you put cells in the end like that, reason that what makes this frame so awesome, as you notice, the side panels obviously flex out about I think it's like a 1/2 inch on both sides, to be exact. So an extra inch. Now notice, when these cells are back to back like that, they can fit in this frame just like that. Okay, that is very important. And the fact that when you're building a large battery, you need to get as many cells into your frame as possible, and you know how you have them laid out. Now, the normal DIY, the other Chinese frames that don't have this plastic siding with that extra room are only about this wide, and actually even a little less than that, because it's like a little pocket down in there when you open the frame up. So it's not even that much, because you lose about maybe a 1/16 or 1/8 inch on each side. But they're normally, let's just say, about as wide as this frame part right there. And if you notice, when you put the cells in the end like that, you do not have enough room. Okay, that is very important in getting the maximum amount of cells in this frame, because you cannot I calculated, you cannot put cells vertically like that in this frame and be able to put them in a layout which is conducive to series parallel configuration. You know, you can only put so many that way and wide, and when you put them that way, if you want, you know, when you're setting up the way you want your current to flow through your pack, you can't do it correctly. You know, you could possibly do it, but it would not be the correct way. And what I mean by that is, let me show you another thing. When I'm talking about cell configuration and how the current should flow through your pack, also notice when I'm trying to determine how I'm going to lay my cells out, I take the little honeycomb things and I put together, you know, put them together like this, and actually see how I can set it up in the frame. Now, everybody doesn't have access to a computer where they can have a computer CAD do this, you know, digitally for you, and the computer map it out and you know, do all the calculations as far as how you can fit the cells and the cell placement. It's really nice when you have that, but if you don't have it, you got to do it the old-fashioned way, from scratch, map things out physically. And that's the way I'm going to show you here how I'm doing it, because like I said, everybody doesn't have access to that. So when you don't, and I put this piece of cardboard in there to give it some contrast so you can actually see these cell holders, because the siding is black obviously, and with the cell holders, those honeycombs being black, you wouldn't be able to see it too good. So I just put a piece of cardboard in there. Now what I have here is 20 honeycombs, just like that, because we're building a 20S pack. All right, now this is 6P, 20S 6P as it sits here. Okay, now 2 of those packs side by side, because you can get 2 packs side by side in this frame. That's why we did the, you know, we put the cell like that to determine you can get 2 cells side to side. That means you can get 2 packs side by side. So with just this layout right here, 20S 6P, 2 of those side by side would be 20S 12P. Okay, 2 packs side by side. All right, now as far as the 20S stage, as you can see, the way the space, you know, the way the space is contoured, you have to remove one of the honeycombs like I did right here, and what I will be doing is adding that right there. So on this 20S section right here, this last section, it will make that little L turn right there. Okay, so instead of that Cell being down here, it's going to be up there. All right, so you got that. All right, now as far as current flow in this pack, all right, the way the current is going to flow, all right, obviously when you put cells in series, they're going to go like this. The positive of this cell is going to go to the negative of this cell, and it's going to continue on down the line, end to end, like that. All right, now in the pack, because I have the parallel going this direction and the series going this direction, the cells would be, one cell would be going up while the next cell would be going down. The next cell will be going up, the next cell will be going down. That's keeping these cells in series all the way down the line. You with me? Okay, now as far as, like I said, in this direction here, they're in parallel. So when they're in parallel, all the cells are going the same direction. So it will be 6 cells in parallel. They're basically be all tied together. All their positives will be tied together, and all their negatives will be tied together. Okay, this is the first stage. This first line, that's 1S. This stage will be in series with the second stage, 2S, and the entire 2S section will be going down. All of them will be connected, negative to negative, positives to positive. They all be connected, 6 of them in that direction, and they will be in series with the first stage, because the first stage was coming up, these going down, and that continues on down the pack. What that does, now I made a little template right here out of cardboard. Now when I built my pack, instead of this template, this is going to be a piece of copper. I'm going to make wide copper strips. They're going to be shaped just like this, and this is what puts these cells in a series parallel configuration. So when the cells are loaded in here, when you put this piece of copper right there and make the connection between the 1S stage and the 2S stage, that is putting the first stage and the second stage in series like that. Okay, now what that also is doing is allowing the current to flow evenly through all of the cells at the same time, stage by stage. Reason why that's important is because I know you've seen some guys build batteries, and you heard me speak about that snake configuration. A lot of guys build batteries like this. All right, let's say we're building the same battery, 20S6P. They would have 6 cells, all the positives connected, all the negatives connected, right? And they would have them all connected like that. Then their 2S section, they would have right behind it like that, but they would flip that whole section over. So, you know, it's going positive, negative, it's in series. Then their 3S section would be like that, and they continue to make their battery around like that in that configuration, snaking until they get to 20S. Now, will that work? Electrically, it will work as far as 20S, 6P, and you know, if you measure the voltage at the end, it's going to be 72 volts, exactly what it should be. The only problem with this configuration is for high current or even a decent amount of current, it will not work good. As you can see, the current only has one path when you do it like that. There's only one path for the current to flow when you do the snaking pattern. Know what I mean? When the current flows through there, it goes like this and continues on through the battery with one path. When you have it laid out like this, when the current flows through this battery, the current is moving across all 6 of those cells, across all 6 of the next, across all 6 of the next, across all 6 of the next, evenly through that one thick piece of copper. So they're all splitting the current. So there's not, you know, all that current flowing through one path. What makes this even worse is that the actual cells themselves. Okay, now when the current is flowing through this pack, it's not only flowing through the copper that's connecting the cells, the current is actually flowing through the cell itself. You know, the current moving through the battery, you know. Now, in this setup here, the cells at the end of each stage and at the beginning of the next stage, those cells bear an entirely different amount of current than the rest of the cells. All of these cells here puts this whole section in parallel. Yes, it does that. However, when that current moves through this pack, this cell here is catching most of the load of that current, because what they're going to have is a piece of nickel strip connected from there to there and on the bottom. And like I said, it's only got that one path of current flow through that one nickel strip, top and bottom. Whereas though in this configuration here, you have the current flowing through this thick, for one is copper, and for two, you know, the current is going this way across that thick piece of copper, and they're all sharing the amount of current. If you divide it up amongst them 6 cells, let's just say if it's 120 amps, all of those cells are passing 10 amps 20 amps of current. Now, this way, when the current is flowing, when you got 120 amps flowing through this battery, 120 amps is going through just you know, that connection there, top and bottom. Now, even if you make this, you know, even if you try to fortify that with a piece of copper or wire or whatever you do to try to thicken this up, even if you put a whole bunch of these together, maybe 5 or 6 of them, you know, together, and try to make that thick, all of that current is still going to be flowing just through just that part right there. So what that also does, not only is it limiting the amount of current that can flow, what that also is creating is a very high resistance. Obviously, just the physics of it is creating high resistance, because if you imagine that electricity is always compared to water. If that was a water hose and all the water was flowing through that, you know, that one path, you can only get but so much water through there. You know, like this would be a river in comparison to a hose, as far as how the current can flow through the battery. So just keep that in mind when you're doing your cell layout. You don't want your current to only have one path. Let's say there's a short in this battery from the 2S stage to the 3S stage. Piece of that nickel that's making that connection burns. Just like the old school Christmas tree lights. If you're familiar with the old Christmas tree lights, when one bulb went out on those lights, the whole string of lights went dead. That's because those old school Christmas lights was in series. When one bulb went out, they all went out. However, in this configuration here, let's just say a cell failed and it opened and it was no longer passing current. Current is still going to flow through the rest of the cells, and because they have more than one path. So there are multiple reasons why that snaking method is not going to be good. And like I said, when you measure the impedance of a battery like that, it's going to have very, very high resistance. All right, that being said, the whole point of this was that is another reason why I chose this frame, because the way you can lay out your cells in this frame you could get maximum amount of cells, which made for a high capacity, high discharge amp battery. So if you want a lot of range, you don't have to have a high discharge battery, because you can do a high capacity battery with cells that only produce 10 amps discharge rate, and you can have an 80 amp hour, and if you just want hella range, you got 80 amp hours. At the same time, you could build a 80 amp hour molar cell pack. Capacity wise, they're the same capacity, both 80 amp hour, just that those can discharge more current, so it can produce more power. However, the bank, the amount of current that's in that pack, the total amount of charge is exactly the same. It's just how fast it can release that current. So that's the difference between your discharge and your capacity. But discharge and capacity go hand in hand. The more cells you have in parallel, the greater the capacity, the greater the discharge rate. So it adds up. Cell volume adds up in parallel, so does the amount of power being released, the discharge rate. So if you got cells that are 10 amps discharge, you got two of them in parallel, that's 20 amps. If they're 4,000 milliamp, when they're in parallel, that's 8,000 milliamp. It adds up. Okay, add up being in parallel. In series, the voltages add up. Parallel current adds up. In series, the voltages adds up when it comes to the batteries. All right, so that's it for that part. This is basically, just the first little initial step of my battery building process, because you gotta have a plan first before you start building your battery. And obviously you want to get the maximum number of cells that you can get in your frame, and then you want to determine how the current is going to be flowing through the pack that you're building. You gotta think about all these things up front. So that's what I am doing first before I do anything else, is determine how I'm going to set this battery up in this frame. All right, take it easy, take care. Crisscrossing Wires, EEB, the Emoto NB Power Garmada, whatever you want to call these frames, are the best frames that you can use as far as building a clone bike, and you want to build a high power, long range, fast one. That's the frame to get, and that's why check out Sam Johnson. Verify me on that's a great frame, although I'm sure you should know that by now. All right, y'all, take it easy, take care. Crisscrossing Wires, step 1.